A Christmas dinner with an opposite sex best friend attending? Isn't that supposed to be normal? But I didn't see that normal in my husband's eyes when he said, "My best friend Jessica will be joining us for Christmas dinner. Don't overthink it." He tried to explain that she had no family, was in crisis after a recent breakup, and he was just trying to do something kind. But what I knew about her was the complete opposite. That's why I secretly invited her fiancé. When her fiancé walked into the Christmas party, it sent a visible shiver through everyone in the room. My name is Evelyn, 36 years old. And that Christmas, I believed my life was at its most beautiful chapter. I had just been promoted at the Swedish Medical Center, where I had poured my entire youth into becoming the best OB/GYN I could possibly be. I was eagerly envisioning a warm evening in our little kitchen, where Samuel and I would cook our first big Christmas dinner since my promotion, then invite his parents over to enjoy it with us. I wanted everything to be perfect, a small gesture of gratitude to the family who had always supported us. But that evening, while I was chopping onions and the chicken broth was bubbling gently on the stove, Samuel walked into the kitchen, eyes still glued to his phone, and casually said, "I invited Jessica for Christmas Eve. Be mature about it, okay?" I froze. The knife halted on the cutting board. "Jessica, your best friend? That TikTok KOL?" I asked, certain I had misheard. But no. Samuel leaned against the doorway, sighed as if I were the one causing trouble. He said she had no family, that her parents died in a car crash last year, that she had just broken up with her boyfriend and was probably in crisis. He said he wanted to do a kind thing, to help his best friend not be alone during the holidays. I asked, "Then why didn't you tell me earlier?" Samuel immediately turned the blame on me, saying I was making their pure friendship awkward, that I was overreacting, and that even his parents supported Jessica joining us for Christmas. "They liked Jessica before you ever came along." He said it so lightly, but to my ears, it landed like a blade. I just nodded, trying to act like I was fine. But inside, something surged, a feeling I couldn't quite name, a crystal clear sense that something was wrong. As I washed the dishes, the sound of running water mixed with Samuel's faint laughter in the living room. He was texting, his voice and chuckles tinged with something I couldn't quite place. I didn't need to hear the words to understand. The air in the house had changed from that moment on. Suddenly, I felt like a stranger in the very home I had spent years building. And from that moment, I knew this Christmas would no longer be the one I had been looking forward to. 2 nights later, at 11 p.m. during my shift, I had almost forgotten everything between Samuel and me, focusing entirely on the last patient cases of the day. But just as I was wrapping up a medical chart, the ER doors burst open, and James, mutual friend of Samuel and Jessica, rushed in, pale-faced, supporting his wife, who was clutching her lower abdomen, blood soaking both his hands. I immediately recognized it as a danger sign. After a few quick examinations, I knew what was happening. She had a ruptured uterus, a rare and life-threatening complication, especially with her previous surgical scar. There was no time to think about anything else. I called in the emergency surgical team, ordered the OR to be prepped within 3 minutes, and had the patient taken up immediately. Those minutes stretched endlessly, but both mother and baby survived the 2-hour surgery despite a large tear and vascular damage, something I knew wouldn't have been possible if we were 5 minutes later. As we wheeled the bed out of the OR, James stood in the hallway, hands trembling so badly he couldn't even unlock his phone. He nearly broke down when he bowed to thank me. I offered a few words of reassurance, told him that his wife and baby would be okay, as long as we monitored them closely. But when James sat down on the bench and exhaled shakily, he suddenly said something that sent a chill through my entire body. He said, "Evelyn, there's something you need to know. Samuel and Jessica, things have crossed the line." I looked up, my heart seizing between two beats. "What did you say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible. James looked at me, hesitated for a second, then continued. "Samuel told me Jessica had just broken up. So they've been seeing each other a lot to help her get back on her feet. But that's not true. I felt like someone had tightened a grip around my throat. James shook his head. Jessica never broke up. She's about to get engaged to Grayson, a major in the Army. The wedding's planned for next June. I stood still, cold air from the ventilation brushing up my spine. Every word James said tore through the fragile shell of the excuses Samuel had given me. Her parents died. True. She had no family. True. But just broke up. Lonely. Needs support. Poor thing. Let me be there for her a bit so she won't feel sad. Lies. All of it just a carefully spun tale. Just enough to make me seem like the narrow-minded wife, lacking compassion. And the terrifying thing was, I believed him. I realized I had been cast into the exact role Samuel wanted. The sweet, unquestioning wife, never suspicious, just nodding and letting things go. A role written in advance. But that very night, when James told me the truth, I knew this was only the beginning of what lay ahead. On the way home, my eyes were fixed ahead, but my mind kept circling around the words James had said. It wasn't until the car rolled past the gate and into the garage that I realized I was already home. I looked at my watch. 2 a.m. I stepped quietly into the living room and saw Samuel sprawled out on the couch, the scent of beer still lingering in the air. He was fast asleep, not even stirred by the sound of the door closing. The soft yellow light from the living room lamp cast a glow over his face, the face of the man I had once trusted unconditionally, and I suddenly realized I no longer felt familiar with it. As if there were now a distance between us I could no longer name. I looked at his phone lying right next to his hand, the screen completely dark. A fleeting thought passed through me. If I didn't check now, I would forever be led by carefully crafted words. I reached for the phone, entered the passcode, his birthday. The screen unlocked immediately, and just 1 second later, I wished I had never looked. Messages from Jessica filled nearly the entire conversation. Dense, stretching from 11 p.m. all the way to 2, even 3 a.m. Short texts, quick replies, so intimate they couldn't possibly be mistaken for any kind of innocent best friendship. And then I saw the message that made my knees go weak. Delete the hotel video from last week, okay? My heart jolted violently, like someone had clenched it from the inside. Right below it was another message. Your bride-to-be is military. I don't want to get shot by accident. No one says something like that unless they're doing something filthy enough to be afraid of being exposed. My hands were shaking, but I held the phone tightly. I began to screenshot every screen, every message, every icon, every timestamp, not a single piece left behind. I needed to face the truth, no matter how sharp its edges. As I scrolled to the bottom, I saw a folder labeled Hidden. I tapped it, and time stopped. A flood of photos of Jessica, nearly naked, flashed across the screen like shards stabbing straight into my chest. The pictures were taken in a hotel, in the bathroom, even one where the photographer's reflection was caught in the mirror. Undeniably, Samuel. I sank into a chair, my back against the wall, legs slowly going numb, but I couldn't stand. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Maybe my body already knew that if I let the emotions loose in that moment, I wouldn't have the clarity to do what I needed to do. I opened Samuel's personal drive icon and uploaded every photo, message, every piece of evidence into a folder. With each file uploaded, I felt like one piece of truth was being put back in its rightful place. When it was done, I shared that folder with my own Gmail, opened my laptop, and downloaded everything. Once the final photo finished downloading, I returned to Samuel's phone and deleted the folder. He would never know what I had seen. He would never get the chance to erase or edit any of the evidence again. I thought I had reached my limit, but then an old message popped up as I scrolled further up. A message from Samuel's mother. Just one line. So you're inviting Jessica this year? I stared at those words. Each one hit like a fresh bolt of lightning. Not just Samuel, not just Jessica. My mother-in-law knew, and accepted it. And in that moment, I understood that what I was about to do wasn't just about confronting my husband's betrayal. I was about to face a network of people who all believed I would stay silent forever. But they were wrong. The next morning, as soon as Samuel left for work, I closed the office door, opened my laptop, and searched for a name I'd once heard during a seminar on civil investigations. Lorraine Sanders, a female private investigator with over 20 years of experience in infidelity and financial fraud. I picked up the phone, my hand still shaking, but my voice eerily calm. I need to see you, as soon as possible. Just 2 hours later, we met at a small coffee shop near Fremont. Lorraine didn't say much. She just listened intently as I handed her the files I had collected. She looked at me for a long moment, the look of someone who had seen too many women betrayed, but rarely one this composed. She laid out an investigation plan immediately, and just 48 hours later, Lorraine called me in a low, steady voice. I have something. The report landed in my inbox, nearly 40 pages. I read every line, and each one was another cut. Samuel and Jessica had been having an affair for 18 months, longer than the entire time I had been manipulated into believing they were just close friends. It started right after Jessica's parents died in a car crash while Grayson was stationed in South Korea and couldn't return. Samuel was the comforter, Lorraine's exact wording in the report. But I knew well that was just a moral cloak thrown over a willfully deceitful relationship. The investigator had even recorded 6 clear videos of them entering a luxury apartment just 3 blocks from Samuel's office. An apartment I had never once heard him mention. They entered during lunch, in the afternoons, sometimes late at night, and left like longtime lovers, not remotely afraid of being seen. My throat went dry, but I kept reading. The forensic accountant's report, someone I hired right after discovering the apartment, was even colder. Samuel had forged advertising invoices, embezzled the marketing budget by creating fake expenses. The money was funneled through 3 sub-accounts, then used to pay for that luxury apartment, buy Chanel, Dior, Bottega bags, niche perfumes worth thousands for Jessica, even a couple's spa package at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. The accountant made it clear. A portion was paid using the couple's joint credit card. My card, my money, my effort. I don't remember how I breathed when I heard that, but I do remember what I did next. I opened every online banking account, pulled up every statement, every transaction from the past 18 months, and downloaded them all, storing them in a folder labeled Phase 1, Financial Fraud. When I closed the laptop, I was no longer the confused, wounded wife of 2 days ago. I had become someone preparing to expose a truth they never thought I'd be smart enough, or strong enough to see. And for the final piece to fall into place, I needed a witness Samuel would never expect. Grayson, Jessica's fiancé. I opened Jessica's Facebook page, filled with glittery filters and sickly sweet captions that made my skin crawl. I scrolled down to the friends list, past hundreds of names, until I saw a man in a military uniform, strong smile, honest eyes. Grayson Hayes. I clicked Add Friend. 2 minutes later, the green light blinked. Accepted. I took a deep breath, opened the message window, and sent the first line along with the photo evidence. I think you need to see this. At first, I got a very polite but skeptical reply. Who are you? This sounds more like jealousy than truth. I didn't blame him. If someone sent me what I had just sent, I'd react the same way. But 1 minute later, after he opened the photo of Jessica in an elevator with Samuel, his hand on her lower back, their mouths nearly touching, Grayson went completely silent. 5 minutes. Then 10. And I wondered if he was breaking something. Then my phone buzzed. Just 2 short lines. I'm requesting leave. I'll come to Seattle. Don't tell anyone. I set the phone down, my chest heavy as stone. This was bigger than anything I had imagined. This wasn't just a husband-wife matter anymore. This was about 2 lives being dismantled by the same pair of traitors. When Samuel came home that night, he was cheerful, as if nothing had happened. He set his bag down, wrapped an arm around my shoulders, and said, "You've been more reasonable lately. This Christmas is going to be great. I smiled at him, a smile that, had Samuel been even a little more aware, he would have noticed lacked any warmth. But he didn't. He never really paid enough attention to my emotions to see that. The only thing echoing in my mind was, smile, stay calm, because this will be your last Christmas as the good husband. That night, I opened my private safe, placed the full financial reports, investigator photos, bank statements, inside. Every document, every piece of evidence was a declaration. I would no longer stay outside the story he had scripted. Near midnight, my phone lit up. Grayson had sent a video file, just a few seconds long, but enough to send chills down my spine. It was Jessica, trying on wedding dresses at a luxury boutique, filmed just 10 days ago. She was smiling blissfully, spinning in a glittering white gown, with the face of someone secretly destroying 2 lives behind closed doors. And in that very moment, I knew this Christmas would be the day the 2 betrayers would face everything they had done. The next morning, I left the house early to buy more ingredients for the honey-glazed ham and a few of Samuel's favorite sauces, even though deep down, I knew I was merely completing the final rituals of a marriage about to end. The store was packed with pre-holiday shoppers, but I still patiently pushed my cart through each aisle. As I was choosing honey, I heard a familiar voice. Evelyn? I turned around and saw Penelope, our 72-year-old neighbor, who watered her front lawn every morning. She approached gently, touching my hand, and asked, "Have you been working night shifts a lot lately?" I nodded, not thinking much of it. But then Penelope tilted her head, lowered her voice as if afraid to startle me. "You know, for the past 2 weeks, every morning around 4 when I water my plants, I've seen a young woman leaving your house." My heart dropped to the floor. I forced a smile, but my throat was tight. "You? You're sure it was my house?" I asked, though inside, I already knew the answer. Penelope nodded. Yes. Long hair, tall, usually wearing a baseball cap. She always looked around very quickly. I thanked her, trying hard not to tremble in front of an elderly woman, but as I pushed my cart away from the aisle, I felt like my feet no longer touched the ground. They had boldly walked into my house, slept in my bed, roamed through the walls I had paid for month by month, and they thought I would never know. When I got home, that feeling only intensified. I changed clothes, stepped into the bathroom, and immediately noticed a strange scent, a sharp, sweet perfume that wasn't mine, nor Samuel's. But I had smelled it before, in a TikTok video Jessica posted, flaunting her signature scent. The towel hanging in the bathroom had also just been used. Not by me, and certainly not by Samuel, who rarely used the guest towels. I opened the small trash bin under the sink. A pastel blue plastic straw sat glaringly atop the garbage bag, the exact type of matcha straw Jessica always used in her morning videos. I picked it up with 2 fingers, and nausea surged through me. I needed no one else to say anything. No detective, no digital evidence. What she left in my trash felt like a declaration. I was here. I set the straw down on the kitchen counter, took a deep breath to stop myself from crying. Just then, as I stood there, Samuel walked past, still holding an open beer can, and patted me on the shoulder, like we were still the happy couple. "You okay? This Christmas is gonna be a good one." I turned to look at him. His smile was so casual, so brazen it felt grotesque, and I could only give a faint smile back, a smile I no longer recognized on my own face. Because by then, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. There was only a cold, hollow void, and the fire in me had gone completely out. On Christmas morning, I still woke up early, like every year, preparing the big meal I once used to look forward to. I baked bread, simmered sauces, checked the oven, set the table. Everything unfolded with the habits of someone still trying to cling to the meaning of family, even though deep down, I already knew this dinner no longer belonged to me. Around 9 a.m., Samuel's parents arrived. They hugged me as usual, bringing the traditional tray of krumkeki cookies that Marjorie, my mother-in-law, made every year. But right after that, she turned to Samuel, laughing loudly, and said, "Evelyn always cooks so well, just like Jessica used to." I froze. One simple sentence, but it pulled me backward by years. So they had compared me to her from the beginning. So Jessica never really suddenly appeared. She had always been there, in their thoughts, their stories, their family memories. I slowly set the cookie tray on the table, trying to steady my breath. Less than an hour later, the doorbell rang. Jessica walked in, a full 20 minutes late, as if she wanted everyone to wait. She wore a tight red dress, her face fully made up, her smile so bright it looked fake. But what chilled me wasn't the dress. It was how she ran to hug Samuel. A hug far too long. The kind of hug that came from someone who believed she had a right. Samuel hugged her back, naturally, as if it were something they always did. The air in the house changed instantly. From the moment Jessica entered, I felt like an outsider in a circle that had already been drawn. A circle of Samuel, Jessica, and his parents. I was merely extra. At the meal, Samuel didn't sit next to me. He pulled up a chair between Jessica and his father Richard, a spot he had reserved for me in previous years. Our Christmas dinner had turned into some strange stage, where I watched the three of them interact like their own little family. Jessica touched Samuel's hand as she laughed. His parents told stories only she understood. Samuel served her food, not once looking in my direction. I sat still, listening to every word, every breath, every glance exchanged between them. But what they didn't know was that under the table, right beneath my feet, a small USB drive had already been placed, containing all the evidence: messages, videos, statements, forensic reports, investigator photos. I couldn't be sure what would happen today, but there was one thing I knew for certain. When the moment came, everything on that USB would end this charade. Once and for all. That moment came sooner than I expected. Just as everyone was about to enjoy the honey-glazed ham I had just pulled from the oven, its sweet aroma still warm, filling the kitchen, the doorbell rang. A crisp, sudden ding-dong that silenced the dinner table instantly. Samuel stood up to open it, but I stepped forward first. My hand on the doorknob was so calm, even I was surprised by it. As the door opened, winter wind brushed against my face, carrying the familiar chill of Seattle. And standing in front of me was Grayson, in full military uniform, shoulders squared, insignia gleaming, his face as stern as stone. His eyes didn't blink. No hesitation, no softness. I smiled faintly, tilted my head in greeting. "Merry Christmas," just in time. He gave a slight nod, his gaze passing over me, as if silently affirming he was ready for everything about to unfold. I stepped aside and welcomed him in. As we walked into the living room, the air in the house shifted instantly. Samuel's parents froze. Richard furrowed his brow. Marjorie instinctively clenched her napkin. "You are?" she asked, voice trembling, not sure if from cold or dread. I placed a hand on Grayson's shoulder and smiled calmly. "Jessica's fiancé." A heavy silence dropped like a stone over the room. Just seconds later, I heard the sharp, dry clink of a fork falling onto a plate. Jessica jumped to her feet, her face ghostly pale, eyes so wide I thought she might faint. Samuel's eyes darted, sweat beading on his forehead, though the room was far from warm. No one spoke. It was as if someone had pressed pause on every character in the room. Grayson pulled out a chair, sat down at the table with composure, placed both hands on the surface, and looked directly at Samuel and Jessica. He spoke in a low, steady voice, but it landed like a hammer on a door. "Seems I wasn't part of anyone's plan today." That sentence, cold, sharp, and perfectly timed, was all I needed to know. The unveiling had just begun. The room remained frozen, like the icy surface of Lake Washington in the heart of winter. And before anyone could stammer out a defense, I walked to the TV across from the dining table. "Since everyone's here," I said, voice soft as a breeze, "I think it's time." I picked up the remote and pressed the button. The screen went black for a second, then lit up with familiar black and white text. Messages between Samuel and Jessica. Words I had read in the dark of our bedroom. "Delete the hotel video from last week." "Your fiancé is military, I don't want to get shot." Heart emojis. Baby nicknames. 2 a.m. calls. All illuminated on the large screen, more damning than any excuse. Samuel's parents turned to their son, subtle twitches on their faces, revealing the realization that the child they'd defended for years was not who they thought. But that was only the beginning. I hit the next button. The detective's footage played. Jessica and Samuel entering the elevator of the secret apartment. His arm wrapped around her waist. They kissed, deeply, shamelessly. In the glow of Christmas lights, the mechanical hum of the elevator echoed through the room, cutting deep. Jessica broke down in sobs, hands shaking as they covered her face. "He lured me," she gasped. Samuel shot up, voice booming so loud the water glasses rattled. "She made the first move, she did." They began blaming each other, like two cornered animals. I didn't need to interfere, because Grayson stood first. His gaze wasn't one of chaotic anger, but of a chilling, soul-deep disappointment. He slowly removed the engagement ring from his finger and dropped it on the table with finality. The metallic clink rang through the room like the death knell of a vow. "I'm not marrying someone like you," he said. Clear, steady, not rushed. Marjorie's hand flew to her mouth. Richard recoiled, mumbling, "God, how long have we been deceived?" I didn't look at Jessica. I looked at Samuel, panic-stricken, watching his world collapse. And it was. I knelt, opened the drawer beneath the dining table, and took out the small black USB I had prepared that morning. I placed it in front of Samuel. "I emailed a copy to your company this morning," I said. No shouting, no malice. Just truth. He stared at the USB like it might explode. His face drained of color, lips trembling, eyes unfocused. And in that kitchen, filled with the scent of cinnamon, honey, and Christmas lights, Samuel finally realized that everything he had tried to bury had risen to consume him. No one said another word. Only the tick, tock of the wall clock filled the room, each sound chilling and precise. Then, suddenly, a chair screeched. Jessica stood, face soaked with tears, hands frantically wiping away what couldn't be erased. She muttered incoherent words and bolted for the door, heels clacking sharply on the hardwood. The door slammed behind her with the finality of fate. In the heavy silence, Grayson turned to me. He didn't look at Samuel or his parents, just me, with a sincerity I had never seen from a stranger. He reached out and shook my hand, firm and steady. "Thank you, doctor," he said, voice strong but controlled, "for saving me from a lifetime mistake." I nodded, speechless, not from emotion, but from the quiet understanding that he knew exactly what I had survived to reach this moment. Grayson left without another word, his steps purposeful, like a soldier who had completed his mission. When the door shut behind him, silence returned like a thick curtain draped over everything. That's when Samuel erupted. He jumped to his feet, finger pointing at me. "You're cruel! Evelyn, do you want to destroy my life that badly?" I looked at him, steady, pain long gone. "No," I said, my voice so calm that even Marjorie looked up. "I simply chose the truth. You're the one who destroyed your life." Richard sighed, his hands gripping the armrest. Marjorie bowed her head, fingers laced together, unable to meet her son's gaze. For the first time since I joined this family, no one defended Samuel. No one called me too sensitive. No one said I didn't understand him. They sat, silent, stunned, and ashamed. In that moment, I knew even they could no longer deny what had happened. "I want a divorce," I said, firm, clear, final. The words dropped like stones onto the table. Marjorie furrowed her brows, but didn't protest. Richard nodded, slowly, sadly, but in agreement. Samuel looked around, searching for someone to save him, but no one did. Not Grayson. Not Jessica. Not his family. Not me. I stood, went to the bedroom. The small navy suitcase I'd packed 2 nights ago was ready. Neat, precise, prepared. I zipped it, grabbed the handle, and walked out into the living room. The room felt like a stranger's house now. Cinnamon, pine wood, golden Christmas lights. Once warm, now a backdrop to a long-running lie. No one stopped me. No one called my name. No one asked me to stay. I opened the door and stepped into the cold. Snowflakes landed softly on the awning. Cold, light, but free. I didn't look back. I rolled my suitcase over the concrete, heading toward the waiting car, leaving Samuel standing in the ruins he had made. I left that house on Christmas night, and 3 days later, Seattle stepped into the new year under the biting chill of January. But while fireworks lit up the city skyline, Samuel's life entered a different kind of winter. On the morning of January 3rd, while I was sipping coffee in my parents' kitchen, my phone buzzed. An email from Hannah Patel, head of internal audit at Samuel's company, the one I'd sent the USB to. Her message was brief. Evelyn, thank you for providing the evidence. We held an emergency meeting this morning. Decision: Samuel Linwood, suspended indefinitely. I read it 3 times, not with glee, but disbelief that all of this had happened in under a week. That afternoon, the internal report concluded. Samuel was ordered to repay double the amount embezzled from the marketing budget. No warnings, no second chances. Only an ultimatum: repay within 45 days or face a civil lawsuit, possibly criminal if necessary. A former colleague of his messaged me, someone who had met me at past company events. Evelyn, they locked his email, revoked his badge, and escorted Samuel out of the building this morning. I didn't reply. I just looked out the window at the thin snow melting on the sidewalk. And then came the cascade of consequences Samuel had set in motion. He rushed to sell the secret apartment where he'd met Jessica. Emptied his 401k, losing nearly half to early withdrawal penalties. Listed his new Lexus RX 350 for sale. Liquidated his Apple and Tesla shares, investments he once flaunted proudly. And Jessica. You wouldn't believe how far she fell, but I'll save that for the final part. While I began clearing out my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, Samuel, the man who once thought he had everything under control, was left grappling with debt, unemployment, disgrace, and the loss of his entire family. The cruelest truth was that everything happening to him was the result of his own choices, not mine, not anyone else's. After learning that his company had suspended him indefinitely, I sat alone in that old room for a long time. No Samuel, no message alerts, no knot of guilt twisting in my chest. Just silence, the kind I once feared, now suddenly felt like something I could breathe more deeply in. 3 days later, I filed for legal separation. No hesitation, no wavering. There was nothing left to salvage in a marriage that had died long before I realized. I submitted the papers online through King County's court system, and it felt like I was dropping a heavy key I'd worn around my neck for far too many years. Friends and colleagues found out through brief hallway conversations at the hospital. They hugged me, brought food, sent comforting messages, and shared articles on recovery after betrayal. I didn't tell them the details, just said I needed time. But somehow they all seemed to know. And their presence, sometimes just a hand on my shoulder, made me feel less alone. In the days that followed, outside of my OB/GYN shifts, I would steal quiet moments in the car or while tidying my room to listen to podcasts about healing from betrayal. The voices of women I didn't know, women who had survived the same thing, poured into my ears, into my chest, into places long left wounded. They talked about boundaries, dignity, and not needing to be strong all the time. And I found myself nodding along, as if someone were finally reading the thoughts I had buried inside me. At night, I reclaimed the little space that was now mine again. I lit pine-scented candles, the kind that reminded me Christmas didn't have to be defined by this year's pain. I strung warm yellow lights around the window. I placed a few pine sprigs into a glass vase, not for decoration, but as a reminder that some things can still live, still smell sweet, even after being cut from their roots. And then, on a cold evening, as I folded a newly bought towel, my vision blurred. There were no arguments, no one calling my name, no one I had to become better for, just to be loved. Only me, and the tears I had held in for months. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to cry. Not because I missed Samuel, not because I mourned the marriage, but because finally, I was walking away from it. But life after a shattered marriage doesn't quiet down right away. In Seattle, rumors move fast, like the sea wind off Elliott Bay, and within weeks, I began hearing stories from the most unexpected places. One afternoon after my shift, while changing out of my scrubs in the hospital break room, a former colleague of Samuel's, someone I'd met at charity events, called me. Her voice hesitated before she spoke. "Evelyn, I just wanted you to know this wasn't the first time. Samuel hit on a female intern 3 years ago. She quit right after." I wasn't shocked. I didn't shake. I just felt empty, but strangely light. My marriage hadn't been the first casualty, only the last one he'd have to face. A few days later, Richard and Marjorie, Samuel's parents, called me. They apologized. No flowery words, no blaming anyone else, no defending their son. "We've sided with Samuel for so many years. We never saw how much you were hurting," Marjorie said through tears. I sat on the sofa, hands clasped in my lap, and for the first time, I spoke from the very bottom of my heart. "I forgive you, but I can't go back." And they understood. After the separation was finalized, the court ruled that the house belonged to me under our prenuptial agreement. One spring morning, I drove there, stood before the door that had witnessed so much pain. But this time, I didn't enter as a betrayed wife. I entered as the new owner, someone who would decide everything from this day forward. I hired painters, replaced the carpet, threw out everything Samuel had chosen, changed the wall colors, rearranged the kitchen, bought new sheets, hung up cream-colored curtains I'd always liked but never bought, because Samuel said they weren't his taste. 2 months later, the house looked like a completely different place. No more strange perfumes, no trace of betrayal, no memories that made my throat tighten. One afternoon, as I was rearranging pine branches in the vase on the dining table, there was a knock on the door. It was Penelope, the 72-year-old neighbor who had once told me about the woman she saw leaving my house at 4 a.m. She brought a warm apple pie, the smell of cinnamon warming the front porch. She handed me the pie and said, "You deserve a new life, Evelyn." I looked at her, then around at the house glowing with soft sunlight, so quiet and peaceful I could hear the wind moving through the pine trees in the yard. I smiled. A real smile, no pretense, no restraint. Time passed, softly but steadily, bringing me to a new Christmas. A Christmas I never thought I'd have. The house that once bore witness to pain, betrayal, and silence now wore a new skin, warm and vibrant. The soft gold of string lights I had hung myself shimmered on the walls like breaths of light. Snow fell gently outside the window, layering the front path in a pure white. I celebrated Christmas my way. Not to please anyone, not to hide pain, but to honor the journey I had survived. My parents arrived first, bringing the family soup my mother used to make when I was little. A few close colleagues from the hospital came next, laughing and chatting as they stepped inside. And finally, Penelope, with another warm apple pie. Same cinnamon smell, but today it carried a new meaning, a celebration of a brand new chapter. We sat around the table. The pine candle glowed gently, laughter mixed with Christmas music from a small speaker in the corner. I looked around, at the people who truly loved me, the ones who had stood by me when everything collapsed, when I had to rebuild from nothing. I raised my glass. My voice didn't shake, didn't break, steady and sure, like my heart had become. Last Christmas, I lost everything I thought was mine. This Christmas, I've reclaimed myself. Everyone toasted with me. Not loud, not showy, but full of sincerity. After dinner, as everyone talked and laughed, I walked to the window and cracked it open. A gust of Seattle wind brushed my skin, making me shiver, but I felt oddly clear. I took a deep breath, long, full, grounded. I closed my eyes for a moment. I felt the scent of snow, pine, Christmas. I felt my heart beating a new rhythm. And when I opened my eyes, I knew with certainty, my life, from this moment on, is mine. A new chapter, free, peaceful, and strong, had begun. Oh, I almost forgot. After Jessica ran from my house that Christmas dinner, Grayson went live on TikTok that same night. He stood before the camera in uniform, voice unwavering, gaze icy. He announced that he had just ended his engagement, not because of differences or incompatibility, but because Jessica, his future bride, had been cheating with her best friend for over a year. He showed proof right on the live stream, photos, videos, the messages I'd sent him. Everything laid bare before more than 100,000 live viewers. Within 2 weeks, consequences hit Jessica faster than anyone expected. The brands that once hired her for reviews were boycotted by viewers. Sales plummeted. They sued. Class actions. Image damage claims. I heard the total amount she owed was over $300,000. Jessica had to sell her handbags, her shoes, her jewelry, even the car she flaunted online. No one hired her again. No contracts, no invites, no career. She disappeared from TikTok in silence. And then a few mutual friends told me they'd seen her at casinos, mascara smudged, dark circles under her eyes, gripping a wine glass like it was the last thing left in her life. Later, Grayson, who I kept in touch with now and then, told me that 2 weeks ago he saw her in Las Vegas. Not in a fancy hotel, not in a lit-up casino, but in the underground tunnels, living like the mole people, those with nowhere left to go and no one left to return to. If this story has touched you, please like to support my journey, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next stories. Stories about truth, boundaries, and how a woman can start again, slowly but firmly.